Karla Schaefer, designer for Antique Beads, and I'll be demonstrating how to make a macrame bracelet. The tools and supplies needed for this project will be a macrame board by Beadsmith. You can use the larger version, which is 11.5 by 15.5, or you can use the smaller one, which is 7.5 by 10.5. You will also need some 4mm gemstone beads or 4mm round beads. You will need some super lawn. I'm also going to be using E6000, Sappa Gap, a Kumihimo hook and eye clasp in the 3.2mm. You will also need a scrap piece of fire line and a needle. This is Beadsmith's macrame board, and it is a self-forgiving foam. It has notches that go all the way around the sides of it, and this makes it perfect for the macrame. And the first thing I'm going to do is explain how you figure out how much thread that you're going to use. And everything that I've read says to use 1.5 times the measurement of your wrist. So if I was going to make a 7-inch bracelet, then I would multiply that by 1.5. But what I've done in purpose of using this board, and I'm using the larger one, is I went ahead and cut this thread 24 inches. I'm also just going to use the end of my clasp for right now as a weight, not a weight necessarily, but something to keep my thread from slipping out of the board, because I will be tugging on it. So I'm just going to tie this in a knot, and I'm going to place this at the number 7 notch, and that's just a point I chose, no significance really. But each of these marks is a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to take the thread and I'm going to run it back here at the bottom. Now I've got plenty of excess. I have made this bracelet a couple of times and I haven't quite figured out the correct amount of thread yet. So for me, it is better to have too much than not enough, because they said whatever measurement you use for the center thread, you should use 4 times as much for the knotting thread. So I would do that, but then do extra. For the purpose of this demonstration, I actually don't have as much as I need to complete a full bracelet. So I'm just going to start one for you, and then I'll show you one on a completed one. So the first thing I've done is I've cut my knotting thread, and I want to fold it in half. Then I'm going to slip this under the working thread here, the center thread. And I'm going to bring it up to this 7 notch here, or the 7-inch mark. And the first thing we're going to do is just simply make a square knot. And a square knot is like this. So you're going to take your thread, I'm going to take my left thread, I'm going to lay it over the middle thread, I'm going to take the other side, and I'm going to run it underneath and through the loop that I've made. Well, I say I am. And we're going to start off with our knot here. This is a square knot. And then I'm going to pull. And you'll be constantly tightening and pulling this thread here in the center. Now I've got half of my knot. Now I started off with my left thread. So now I'm going to go with my right thread, and we're just going to do this reverse every time. I like to loop my thread. It helps me give something to poke under the center thread. Bring it through the loop and tighten it. And as you'll see, you'll have a little knot here. And this is how I can tell what side to start on, especially if I've put it down and I stopped. You'll have a little, I don't know, a bar or a straight thread right here. So this is my indication that when I start my new knot, I'm going to be using this thread. And you can start off either way. You can start off with the right or your left, however you want to do. But this is where I'm going to know that I'm going to start off. So I'm going to take, again, this thread, lay it over, take this thread, run it under and through the loop. You want to do this for several knots. This is going to be what we add and put into our clasp, and I've done about a 1/2 inch usually, so I'm going to go ahead and make several of these little knots. And again, here's the bar, say, or the straight line of the knot, so I know I need to start with this one. So I'm going to do these knots for about a 1/2 inch, and like I said, this mark here is my 1/2 inch, and then I will show you how to thread the beads onto our working threads. our knotting thread and show you how to add the beads into our work. Okay, I just have just about a 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to make one more knot, and then we'll string some beads on. And as you can see, my string is slack here. Here we go. Now the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to string on the beads that we're going to use in our knotting. And this is more of an, I think they called it an inverted square knot pattern, where the beads go on the outside and they're not going on this center thread. So the best way to get these beads on your super line is to take a needle and a piece of fire line and make a loop, knot it, and bring your knot up to the eye of the needle. Then we're going to take our super line and we're going to run it into the loop of the fire line. And then I'm just going to string some beads on. And of course that sounds easier than it is. But I'm going to string some beads, and I have, broke a couple of needles, so be careful or be prepared. And just, this is how you can get those beads, so small beads on that super line. This is just a nice little trick. It's also good for kumihimo when you're dealing with super line and beads with kumihimo. I'm just going to string a couple of beads on each thread so that I can show you. Think for a full bracelet it might have taken about 30 beads per thread, maybe 60 beads. I will give an exact count on the website of what I used for my samples. And then just knot the end of your thread so that our beads don't come off. And then we're going to thread some beads onto the other side. And then as soon as we get this done, I'll show you how to add the beads as we knot. Okay, now that I have a few beads for the demonstration on my threads here, I'm just going to show you how we add the beads to the bracelet. So what we're going to do is we're going to run one bead up to the work. And again, you want to take note of where you stopped and where you would want to start. So my straight knot or thread right there knows this way. I know I need to start with this side. I'm going to tighten this up a little bit. I'm going to bring the beads up. And I'm going to make my loop over the thread. I'm going to take my other thread and work it under the thread in the middle. Sometimes you have to kind of lift it. There we go. Bring it through the loop. Pull your end through. And knot. Just as we were doing. Now I need to do the other half. So I'm going to go again. Make a loop over. Almost looks like a 4. Run your thread under and through the loop. Pull your thread through. And knot. Now you can slide this knot up and you can kind of tighten it up a little bit. As you can see, again, we're where we started. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can go ahead and continue to add your beads here, or you can go ahead and make another knot. I'm going to go ahead and make another knot, put a little more space in between the sets of beads. So again, I'm going to make this knot. Run this thread up under and through the loop. I know you may not be able to see that. Let me try it again. Run the thread under and through the loop and pull the thread through. Now you can slide up your next set of beads. You're going to continue this until you get the length of the bracelet that you want, and you can use the grid lines on here if you want to. For probably a 7 to 7.5 inch bracelet minus the clasp, you'd probably want to bead up to 6.5 inches, and then give yourself another 1/2 inch of the knots. It's just kind of a work in progress, or kind of just takes a little figuring out sometimes. The length, like I said, I've done it a couple of times and I've come up with several different lengths of bracelets. So it's just one of those things I think it's just going to come with practice. And if you get your beads off, like I just did, I've got it turned around. So just take it apart. There's nothing we can't undo. Slide them back up. I want to tighten this up a little bit. And I like to try to keep things in place with my fingers as I'm working to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to. And then make sure those are back up. You can work them up. You can also tighten your knots up and you can move them up. See, like that. So we're going to do another knot. You might find it just to go ahead and swing that thread over might be easier for you. Instead of you loosen everything up, just tighten it back. Move it up, tighten it, make another knot, and then you'll be ready to add some more beads. And you can add another bead to bring your beads back up. And as I said, you just work this until you get to the length that you'd like it to be. And then I'll show you how to finish this. And make sure your beads stay in line where they're supposed to be. If you catch it, you can bring it back up. Sometimes everything gets kind of hung up there. You just gotta work it through. Okay. And you just simply make another knot here and continue down. This is one of the bracelets where I really don't think I cut enough thread, knotting thread here. So I'm going to end this one a little shorter than I would for a 7.5 inch bracelet. So I've completed all of the beads and all the knots in between, as you can see. And as you can see, we're ended right here where the mark is. So now I'm going to do some more just plain knots right here as we did when we began, so that we can have something to add our clasp to. So I'm simply going to add more knots here at the bottom. And I even removed the beads from the thread just so it'd be easier for me to work with, so I wouldn't have to tug and pull them. It's not necessary, but that's what I went ahead and did. So I'm just going to finish our square knots. In macrame is considered micro because of the materials used, or the thread used is smaller. But it's still, you know, your basic macrame knots. Maybe just a little more refined. Okay, I'm going to probably add another knot or two here. And then we'll be able to take this off and add our clasp. Probably add one more. Okay. Now that we've got the bracelet complete, the thing I'm going to do now is use our Zap-A-Gap, and I'm just going to dab it on the end right here so I can cut this, and then we'll figure out how much measurement we need for our clasp. I'm going to use my nipper tool, and I'm going to get rid of this thread here and these threads here. And obviously I'm not going to need this whole length to fit into the clasp, but I would like it to fit as close to the beads as possible. And I'm going to be using E6000 to actually glue the clasp on because of the viscosity of the E6000. It'll allow that to sit in there, and I'll be able to place the braid in there and let it set. So that's how we're going to do this. And I'm just going to trim. I'm going to add more of this further down because I know I'm going to need to trim it. I don't want all my braid to come undone. One side at a time here. Just kind of see what you're going to need for it to fit in there. And the braid will, yes, you just kind of have to twist it in, see how that's going to fit, and work the other side. And the Zap-A-Gap dries pretty quickly. Just still want to be careful about getting it on you. And again, I'm just going to fit this. And I'm going to kind of twist it in there. You may even have to, bunch up the end there a little bit to get it to fit in. Now that I know what I'm going to do, add E6000 to this end. You want to be sure and clean the excess and just let this set. And you would do the same for this end here. And I'll show you a completed piece that I have. Just let that set probably a good 12 to 24 hours before wearing it. But this is what your finished product will look like. And this has been the Macrame. You can find the bead board, the beads, the thread, clasps, and all the other materials at auntiesbeads.com.